they give her some really dark material. They give her some great stuff, and Miss Minutes chat is terrifying. There's some really good sequences, especially when she's paired with Jonathan Majors, who I'm going to bring up in just a bit. But she gets a moment in the show. I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class on the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon, where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching, and enjoy the video. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show, and that is my review for Loki Season 2, or what I personally believe is probably the final season for Loki. And to give you a bit of a synopsis, a bit of a background, taking place immediately after the events of the first season, Loki is working with Mobius and other members of the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, to navigate the multiverse in order to find Sylvie, Ravonna Renslayer, and Miss Minutes, who have catapulted the multiverse into complete chaos, all the while dealing with variants of He Who Remains, also known as Kang the Conqueror. Now, much like in my original review, where I did do an impressions review, I reviewed basically the first 2 episodes of Loki. But much like for that review, I kind of wanted to share my general thoughts on, obviously, Tom Hiddleston as Loki, and obviously the first season. This has been quite a journey, chat. You know, I think for a lot of us, we were introduced to Tom Hiddleston as Loki in the original Thor. And we've pretty much been following him for nearly 15 years as this character, chat. And I think in every single thing that he has appeared in the MCU, he has been absolutely fantastic. I think for quite a long time, he was the best villain of the MCU. I mean, I think there's other villains that have come along since then that, were a little bit better. But still, he's always been great. He's always been written very well, and he's obviously always been fantastically played by Tom Hiddleston. He's just a character you love to watch on screen. He's a character that's charming, that you love to hate, even when he does some of the most vicious, despicable things, and he most certainly does in the history of the MCU and the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But you can't help but want to be with him. You can't help but want to watch him in so many of these movies, and I think that's because of obviously the people that have written for him. But I think a lot of it is also Tom Hiddleston himself, putting so much into this character. And of course, he's gone on to obviously great success, appearing in numerous other fantastic TV shows and movies. But I think for a lot of us, he's always gonna be Loki, and to see him in, obviously throughout, season 1, where it's primarily focused on him. It's his series, it's his show, it's his story, was obviously, so great. Like, I was, to this day, obviously until, season 2, Loki season 1 was my favorite of the MCU Disney Plus shows. I think, we can go back and forth about, what's the greatest overall just, Marvel TV series. I think there's a, very good argument to be made that, Daredevil was fantastic. I love Daredevil. But Loki season 1 I thought was excellent. And, with season 2, wow. I'll tell you right now. I had very high expectations for season 2, Loki season 2, especially since, the first season, again, was so good. But as I said in my, initial season 2 impressions review just a few weeks back, I was a little worried, since I thought the first episode was a bit of a mixed bag, a little confusing and overwhelming. For audiences, especially due to the science fantasy jargon and the time mumbo jumbo speak, in that. I thought, it's like, okay, this is a little much. This is a little too technical. It's like, let's kind of get back to just the character stuff. Be fair. I think the best thing about that first episode, though, was Ki-Hu Kwan as OB, as Ouroboros, and he was just a standout. And he brought so much personality to that first episode. And, listen, despite that wonky first episode, I'm very happy to say that that with also a much stronger episode 2, and especially episode 3 onward, Loki season 2 is easily the best Disney Plus Marvel show. Yes, it's visually splendid and is a technical marvel with some of the best editing. I'm going to be praising the editing throughout this review, chat, but it has some of the best editing the MCU has ever featured, both on the big screen and the small screen. But it's the writing and the treatment of the characters that make it so outstanding and, in my opinion, just so unbelievably special. The filmmakers of this show do a great job of weaving the technical aspects and multiverse jargon with fantastic dialogue, emotional scene after emotional scene, and just wonderfully fulfilling character arcs for the entire cast, but especially Tom Hiddleston as Loki. You know, again, we watched this character for almost 15 years, and many of us were introduced to Hiddleston via Loki in those Thor films, and I think this is the best performance he's given as the character. We see him grow and change so much over the course of these 2 seasons, but especially in season 2, this final season. He started out as this, charming but extraordinarily selfish character, and grows into this kind, sensitive, and emotionally burdened hero who sacrifices so much and goes on this incredibly fulfilling hero's journey. I think so often in superhero media, we do see the transition of a villain to a hero, but it seems so, lack of a better term, half-assed. It feels like they didn't do the legwork. It's just like, well, they suddenly just decide to be good now, and here they're teaming up with, whoever. I feel like that's the case with something like Harley Quinn in the comics. Not speaking of some of her other interpretations, adaptations. I think that they've handled that well. But like she left the Joker and suddenly she's going to be a hero working with Batman. It's like, what are you talking about? Wait, what? Like, why would Batman even allow it? It doesn't make any sense. But here, they spend really 12 hours, chat, scene after scene of building to that moment where Loki becomes this incredible hero and this thoughtful individual, and he is no longer selfish. He is completely selfless, and it feels earned. That's what this series does. I think anyone here is like, wait, you telling me that Loki's going to be good? The guy that attacked New York, that did all these horrible things? Yes, because they put in the hard work to achieve that, and they showcase that. And I'm like, maybe I was like, I don't know if you can do that, but they did. And that is what is so immensely impressive. And, it's funny. I think like the first episode of season 1 is called Glorious Purpose, and the final episode is called Glorious Purpose. And he so often says, I am burdened with glorious purpose, right? And he says that in such a selfish way. But that quote, that saying, I am burdened with glorious purpose, is going to hit so much differently now after watching these 2 seasons, after watching season 2, and especially that final episode and in its final moments. And the other part of the show is, his relationships and his rapport with the rest of the cast is just spectacular. It's not just Tom Hiddleston. Like, everyone is bringing their A game to this. Obviously, everyone was so excited for Owen Wilson being, featured in this show as well. I had no idea just how amazing his character would be in this, where if people don't know Mobius, he is this agent basically within the TVA, one of its best agents, tracking down variants, making sure that the timeline doesn't get, messed up, of course. And he pretty much becomes Loki's parole officer, I think, and eventually they're partnered up. But we just see that initial kind of antagonistic relationship morph into this beautiful friendship throughout the series. And that is wonderfully showcased in the second season. And we learn more about Mobius, where he's actually from, who he was, because, for context, and this is, some brief spoilers from season 1, we learned that all these members of the TVA were actually variants plucked from the timeline and forced to work in this, basically this never-ending cycle, where time does not operate in the same way that time ordinarily does in the vast, multiverse. It just kind of stays still, and they just work and they work and they work and they just maintain all of this, right? And he's a company man. He was that guy. He was the guy that believed in the dogma, believed in the doctrine. And, that totally changes for him. And so his whole world shifts. It completely shifts on its axis. And he's questioning things more than ever. We're getting deeper into his character. And there's and him and so many other of the other TVA members, they just have this sense of tragedy to them, where you just feel so bad because you realize like what was taken from them, what was erased from all of their minds. And like Loki is like one of the first people in the show, along with his, other variant counterpart, Sylvie, to realize this and be like, oh my God, this whole thing is completely messed up. But at the same time, it's also needed. Right? It's that thing like, this is so corrupt. This is all based on a lie, but it's still necessary to maintain, which is so great because the show like presents all these different things and then it switches it up and it's like, oh, it totally changes your perspective and it keeps it interesting. Narratively so interesting. And, one of those important factors, one of those important components is Owen Wilson as Mobius. He was a fantastic character, a wonderful addition to the MCU, and he gives a fantastic performance. But, man, his chemistry, though, with Tom Hiddleston, the two of them just going back and forth, they're just this wonderful duo. It's kind of like you think of it as almost like those iconic cop duos, right? These two people that come from very different walks of life. I mean, like, literally, one is a god, is an Asgardian god, and has fought the Avengers, right? And this other guy, well, he was a simple man just wanting to sell jet skis. Like, and it works so well when they're together and they go on all these missions. It's like, wow, okay, And it's not just Owen Wilson, like, Ki-Hu Kwan, who's introduced in the second season as Ouroboros, as OB for short. And he's pretty much the fix-it guy. He's the one that also, well, he is one of two people that created the TVA manual. And again, Ki-Hu Kwan, who's his researching career is just so wonderful to see. It's funny that his two biggest things that have come out are both deal with like multiverse and multiverse concepts, and they're both incredible, which is great. But it's even in the first episode, which I think is the wonkiest episode of the season. It's the only wonky episode. So one is like, oh, but he's just so charming and he is just so excited. And the thing is about him, he gets like a lot of this. He does a great job because he gets a lot of the tech heavy dialogue, which ordinarily would be, one, it's just difficult for an actor to say, obviously, so remember all that. But he's able to sell it, and he just kind of has this wonderful infectious charm. Like in one of the latter episodes, I think it's like episode 4, they're explaining this timeline concept basically. And he's made this small model of basically this machine, and he's kind of apologizing. Well, I apologize. I only was able to use the tools that I had on time, around me, and I only was able to give it like one, paint color. I would have added more paint, and everyone's like, "It's OB, it's fine." He's like, "Oh well, if you guys think it's fine, but then thank you." It's like there's something. It's just, man, you're just adorable. You're just adorable, and his rapport with Tom Hiddleston is fantastic. He's great in the show, and we see him later on, and we learn more about him and where because he's a variant, and we learn where he's originally from, and it's like, oh, it all makes sense now, right? And so he's a wonderful addition to this, and anytime he's on screen, he just starts smiling because he's always doing something amusing. And then we have some other like characters who kind of start out like being more serious, and again being antagonistic to Loki, but they find themselves and they expand their characters. And we've Mosaku, who plays Hunter B-15, and she was originally like this enforcer character that was very much believed in the dogma of the TVA, right, and very strict. And now she's kind of thrust into this like leadership position, which she originally didn't want, but because so much of the leadership at the TVA is kind of gone AWOL, and they're like, well, either we're just going to keep doing what we're doing and purge all these timelines and kill billions, if not trillions of people, or they'll just fucking leave and create their own lives on all these timelines and be selfish about it, right? She has to like maintain this order, which again, and she's conflicted about it because it's all based on a lie, and it destroyed her life, and she lived a life where she was like very happy. And she has this new perception of Loki now, who she considers a very good friend. That's the other thing about this show, is that you just get the sense, because sometimes, like in these movies, you have these characters interact with each other. It's like they're supposed to be friends, but they don't feel like they're friends. All the characters feel so close. They feel like friends. They feel like a family, and that's what this show does so well. These people that were literally like would have been enemies, in the previous season are now just like, hey, we got to all band together. And it just comes across, because that's the thing about this show. It gives it time for these characters to just talk. Like, yeah, you get the spectacle in this series. You get these wonderfully imaginative scenes, and the CGI's on full display, and the practical effects are on display, and all that's done very well. Like, this show ain't cheap. But and thankfully it does not look cheap, but they make the smart choice of that's there. They have the spectacle, but in between all that, you have just these conversations, and where it just further develops and enriches these characters and their relationships. And I was like, this is great. I love it. And then you have even some other like smaller characters get a little more to do. You have Eugene Cordero, who plays the character Casey, who's like an assistant. We learned something about like his past, and he has a better rapport of people. He's not just like a comic relief character. He gets more to do in this series. And I mentioned her before, but Sophie DiMartino obviously comes in again as Sylvie, as female Loki, right? Who has such a major role in the previous season, and obviously being the one who killed He Who Remains, and was also one of the people that kind of set all the problems in motion for season 2. And we find out like where she's been and what she's doing, and how she's trying to find herself on her specific branch of the timeline, and her complicated relationship with Loki. And she has just some amazing dramatic moments with Tom Hiddleston. Again, their chemistry is perfect. It's handled so well. And then when we get to like the villainous characters of this series, which I would argue are Gugu Mbatha Raw as Ravonna Renslayer. I think in the previous season, she was more of like working behind the desk, right? That's what she was. But she's a more proactive character in this particular season, as she's seeking out a variant of He Who Remains, Kang. And she has her partner, although they don't, I love the relationship between Ravonna Renslayer and Miss Minutes, voiced by Tara Strong, which is a fantastic job, because these two obviously have their own motivations. They are clearly obsessed with Kang, or He Who Remains, and want to be by his side, because they clearly love him, but they just despise one another. And so they're kind of just working with each other out of convenience. And their dynamic, their back and forth is so amusing, because they're trying to undercut each other like constantly, and they're kind of like making these snarky comments. I really like them as just this antagonistic duo. And we have like a great back and forth between them, and where one's on top of the other, but the other one manages to get on top of that person. It's just going, it just keeps going up, keeps escalating, like in episode 3 with them. It's really good. Now, Miss Minutes, the other thing is, Chad, like she's cute. Like we've introduced her. She's that little orange clock. She's just so adorable. Tara Strong, obviously is a wonderful history of doing fantastic voices throughout her entire career, whether it be, Bubbles in Powerpuff Girls, or, Raven in Teen Titans, or hell, Batgirl in the original the third season of Batman animated series, right? But they give her some really dark material. They give her some great stuff, and Miss Minutes, Chat, is terrifying. There's some really good sequences, especially when she's paired with Jonathan Majors, who I'm going to bring up in just a bit. But she gets a moment in the show. I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, she's not just an AI program, Chad. She has her own thoughts. She has her own desires, her own obsessions, and they do some really visually interesting things with her in this show. And she's brutal. There's some really disturbing violence in this show that I like. I was like, wow, I'm surprised the MCU went there. And it's so cool, because they they do a great job of introducing like a violent thing of torture in this show, and they initially show it and like how horrifying it can be, and then now we kind of know what that is, and then we see it later again, and it's Miss Minutes using this device, and it's like, oh god, and I love it. And the thing is, they didn't even, because people are like, I wanted to show the horrible thing, and the thing is, they didn't need to, because it's sound design. They, again, going into technical aspects, the sound design in this show is so good. And, you know, all I'll say is that you hear the crunching of bone, the tearing of flesh, the squeezing and the dripping of blood. And I was like, oh my God. And then you just see her demented expression, just just smiling, laughing to herself. And it's like, wow, what a great Marvel villain. Both of them are so good. But, you know, speaking of villains or, you know, villainous-esque characters, although, you know, more complicated, Jonathan Majors, like, listen, everything with Jonathan Majors in real life, what's going on right now, we'll see what happens, you know, whether he's innocent, guilt. I just don't know. I don't know, you know. But in any case, I hope justice is served for whichever party is telling the truth, obviously. Chat, we'll find out. But outside of that, Jonathan Majors, who plays several versions of himself, mainly two versions of Kane in this series, is also outstanding. Is really, really good. We're kind of reintroduced to him in episode 3, where he plays the variant Victor Timely, who is also, we find out, has major connections to the TVA. And this character, which is in like the late 1800s, I think it's like the 1880s, where I guess initially 1860s, but then we see an older version of him played by Jonathan Majors in like the 1880s, right? At the Chicago's World Fair, and he's kind of like this inventor stylized as someone who's like a Thomas Edison or a Tesla, if you will, Nikola Tesla. And, you know, there's some choice of his character I thought like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, where he kind of has a bit of a stutter, right? But it eventually it works so well for his character. And again, his rapport with everybody, especially because he's, you know, really he's in that particular episode, he's dealing with Ravonna, he's dealing with Miss Minutes, and the back and forth between them, and who of these crazy broads of these crazy characters is he going to trust? But then later on, and how he's incorporated into the friend group of Loki and Mobius and Ki-Hu Kwan, and how that works is amazing. He's so good. And that's the thing. It's like, God damn it, Jonathan. It's like, you know, I you know, at the end of the day, like, I hope what he didn't do what he's alleged of doing, chat, because like, God, you're so good. And it made me just really excited to see him again, just as Kane, right? Because he's playing so many different versions of this character, and they all feel very distinct and unique, but there's always like there's like this thread that's similar between all of them. This little thing that they established that I really liked. And I don't even want to say what it is, but all I'll say is he doesn't like partnerships. He's like, it needs to be me. It needs to be me alone. He who remains, right? And that's something that is consistent across every single Kane variant in the MCU, that I need to be the one in charge, no one else. I don't do partnerships. I don't do any of that. You know, it's me. And I like that about him. Even Victor Timely, who is, you know, certainly a more heroic version of Kang. And, you know, I don't think this is a bit of a spoiler, but we do see the return of He Who Remains, and it's done in this real, I'm not going to tell you how he comes back, but it's done in this really entertaining, very smart way. And again, they're not doing anything overly spectacular with him. He's not shooting fucking laser bolts out of his hands. You know, he doesn't even have the Kane outfit on. It's not that. It's just it's him talking. It's him having a conversation. That's what makes it very similar to the way he was handled in the end of Loki season 1. It's just a conversation. And that's when you know you have a great villain, when you are enraptured by your villain, when he's just talking and not doing like, you know, superhero stuff or supervillain stuff, and he's firing lasers or punching a guy. He doesn't throw a punch in this show because he doesn't need to, because his words are so cutting. And how he just breaks it all down, and just like certain revelations, like, oh God, you know, it's so good. And I'll say is they also do some very surprising things with Victor Timely as well. People know what I'm talking. The end of episode 4, they do something with him. It's like, oh no, oh god, and it's great. That's the thing. The show just kept surprising me with its characters. I was like, okay, I see what's gonna happen here. And then they threw me for a loop, and I was like, what's gonna happen? And even though the characters are like saying that, like, what do we do? And it's like, I don't know. Oh, wait till next episode. It just kept me captivated. It really did. Everyone did such a great job. And again, I mentioned the technical aspects of the show, and I was extremely impressed by the production design. I just love the aesthetic of the TVA. Just the how it looks, the organization, because it has this. It's retro futuristic. The technology feels like it's from everything from the late 50s into the 60s and into the early 70s. Everything has a burnt orange, brown look to it, right? But it's also like we go to some areas of the TVA, and it kind of almost looks like the inside of a church. Just the lighting, all that, it was handled very well. It has a very distinct look that separates it from anything else that we've seen in the MCU, which again helps, keeps it unique. It is a very precise visual look, and that really helps a lot. And also we see because we go different other time periods, like we go to Chicago in like the 1880s, actually initially in the 1860s, and it's like all wooden buildings and things. But then again in the late 1880s, and it's like, oh wow, like at the Chicago World Fair, it's like, oh, this looks so good. Just love that attention to details. A lot of aspects of the show are like a period piece. We go from 1860s, 1880s, into the 1960s, into, more recent in the 2010s, and then even more recent in the 2020s. I was like, oh, wow. Just love the way it consistently looked. But here's the thing. This is the thing that impressed me the most in the show. The editing, again, is some of the best, not only in the MCU, but I think any modern sci-fi fantasy show in the last few years, and films. The last episode in particular, called Glorious Purpose, is so meticulously well crafted and fun when it comes to its editing, and all of it is in a way. It's like all the people, like editors need to be they need to be championed. Like I want these editors and put them in, have them do anything. I want to see them work in these big Marvel films, because this is what we need, absolutely. But in a way, the editing is also guided by Hiddleston's performance, especially in the last episode. He ensures that we're not getting lost in the complicated nature of it. And it's all thrilling, it's all funny, and also very scary at times. There are a lot of tense moments in these last several episodes, but especially that final episode. So much so that I started getting nervous watching this, which is, I haven't kind of felt that way about watching a Marvel movie in a long time. Probably, Guardians 3. I would say Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I was like, oh, what's going to happen, right? But outside that, I was like, oh, most of these people are going to be okay, I suppose. And that's when I knew, when I started getting nervous watching this show in a great way, that's when I knew I was watching something very special. And it reminded me of the best aspects of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The show's final 20 minutes is some of the best content within the MCU and acts as a swan song for so many of these characters, but especially Tom Hiddleston. This series and this season cements him as one of the best characters within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and provides him with a full emotional and complete character arc. It provides him with a goodbye, a very loving, well-crafted goodbye. And I was like, wow. I just didn't, I was like, oh, I figured it's like, no, it's going to be a good show. It's going to be really good, but it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be good as season 1. I hope so. But I didn't expect it. I didn't realize how good it was going to be. And yeah, I was kind of blown away. Also, another little thing I want to mention. They also give themselves a way out with Kang the Conqueror if they choose to do that, while at the same time making that character and his other iterations really, really interesting and compelling at the same time. It's like, you know what? If this is the last time we see this character, we see Kane, because, the whole situation, outside of just the storytelling, outside of like how he's presented Marvel, the Jonathan Majors of it all, you know what? If this is also a goodbye to him, this is a good way to say goodbye to him as well, and I was like, wow. And like, what a great character. And they did things with him that are surprising. And and I kind of, to wrap this review up, chat, let me go ahead and give a shout out to the directors and the writers of this show, because they absolutely need to be highlighted in this review. I want to, let me see. Also the editors, but the producers, especially the producers of this show. Producers like Tommy Turtle and Rachel Alter did such a fantastic job with this. But Michael Waldron, here we go. Created by Michael Waldron, like this guy, very impressed with what he was able to do here. Really liked it. Also, the music. Holy shit, chat. The music in this series by Natalie Holt, so impressive. So impressive. Like the score, I was listening to the score before I started my show today. Before I started streaming, I was like, wow, this is like a really goddamn good score. It's one of the many great technical aspects of it. I mean, it's sweeping, it's operatic, it's melancholy. So good. Highly recommend listening to the score if you have not. But the editors of this series, chat, they deserve so much credit. Like they need to put these people on one of the other Marvel movies. And yeah, I just want to obviously, give them a shout out because they deserve it. And Eric Martin wrote the finale. Put that man on something. Put Eric Martin on one of these other Marvel movies, these MCUs. So that's, kind of wrapping this up. I really wish that, these people that worked on this show, from the filmmakers to the directors to the writers, that they were kind of guiding a lot of the multiverse, a lot of the Phase 4 and Phase 5 stuff. Because if everything was the quality of Loki season 2, then the MCU would be golden right now. We would be great. Not like kind of the, mixed bag to be nice, that we're in currently. Because wow, they absolutely nailed it. They absolutely did an incredible job. But yeah, Chad, that's just and Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson directed it. Eric Martin wrote the finale. Give them all the credit in the world. They deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. Incredible. But yeah, Chad, that's just my opinion on Loki season 2. What about you guys? Have you seen Loki season 2? Are you a fan of it? Do you like it as much as I did? If you've not, does this review encourage you to check it out? Let me know. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.